Hello, everybody. It's me, Albatross. Welcome back. Now, yesterday, I believe we left off. Where did we leave off at? Okay. Yeah, they had just crossed the Red Sea. Marion pulls out her timbrels and starts singing a song. Because of helping them escape and whatnot. At least that's what it seems to be. So, after all that, then they head towards the desert. But here's the thing, because it didn't take long. It was like 3 days. 3 days later, after they crossed the Red Sea. Just 3 days. And guess what? There was no water for them to drink. They were, gonna die. You can't really last that long without water. And there they were 3 days later, no water. So, people were what the hell, Moses? You pull us out of Egypt. We have no water to drink. What's going on here? So, Yahweh gives a stick to Moses. Says, here, take this, throw it in that dirty ass water over there, and it'll be clean. So Moses does, and that's what happened. The water becomes drinkable, at least for the moment. Then they drink their water. That's interesting, because a stick, right? It's a stick. It just turned the water clean. It almost sounds more like a technology to me, but because I don't know, like, I'm always suspicious when they talk about like props and objects and throwing sticks in water, because it's like, couldn't God just snap his finger and like make the water clean? Apparently not. He needed a stick. But anyway, so that's just one situation where they were in the desert thirsty. That's just the first 3 days. This is the beginning of 40 years they're going to spend in this place. And it is not the only time. They find themselves begging Yahweh for water, wondering why the hell he brought them there if he was just going to let them die of dehydration. So, and I think that's something that people miss a lot when they read these scriptures and story. They like to blame the Israelites for not listening, for not having faith, for this and that. But you tell me, you're in the desert for 3 days. 3 days. You're already knocking on death's door from dehydration. I mean, what are you going to do? So, I mean, it's easy for us to sit here thousands of years later, not in that situation, and judge these Israelites. But I'm trying to put myself in their position. And dude, 1 day without water, and I'm freaking out. I'm telling you what, I wouldn't have lasted very long. I've been like, yo, what the hell? What the hell? We had water every day in Egypt. Now, what was this all crap about? I would have been mad. I can't even go like an hour without water. I couldn't imagine 3 days. 3 days! 3 days they went without water. But anywho, so they did come across that dirty little spring, and then Yahweh gave them a stick to clean it. Who knows if that was enough water for everybody? I would like to think so. Because they had like lots of people with them in the beginning. Before they all died off later, which we'll get into that. Okay. So, then we get like 2 months later. They're I think they're at the foot of Mount Sinai, or at least they're almost there. I'm not sure if they've reached Sinai yet. But it's been about 2 months since they left Egypt, okay? And now that they've had their water finally, they come to another big problem, and that's food. They're running out of food. They're in like a really, a huge wasteland of a desert. So, naturally, the panic starts to set in again. But Yahweh, hold on a minute. Oh, yeah, that's right. Yahweh, rains manna. This is when he begins to rain manna down on the Israelites. Because obviously they're in a place that's almost like completely devoid of life and water. So he had to do something to feed these people, or they would start eating each other most likely. So he started raining manna for 6 days a week, and like on the 6th day they'd have to collect extra manna for the next day, because there was always that day 7 where there would be no manna. Now go look at the History Channel. They have a lot of speculation surrounding this manna. It's very interesting, because it's like these scientists even like built their own manna machine that only functioned with, what did it function with again? I don't know. It was very cool because it didn't take very much, and it like grew like seeds or something, or some edible fungus that they would call manna. I mean, I don't know if that's the real manna that the Israelites ate back then, but I just thought it was very interesting. But anyway, okay, so like a couple months go by, and they've eaten nothing but manna. The Israelites are, starting to crave like meat and other things. And keeping in mind, manna is not something they know. Like, they have no clue what this manna is. I think manna actually literally means, like, what the hell is it? So, they don't know what it is. But they've been eating it for 2 months. They're sick of it. They want some meat. They say something to Moses, right? And Moses then, in turn, says something to Yahweh. And Yahweh, he lies. He lies. He says, I'm going to give them so much quail, it'll be pouring out of their noses. Because he's kind of mad that they're not satisfied with just the manna. But then he lies and he says, all right, fine, I'll give you meat. I'll give you so much meat, it's going to be pouring out of your ears and your nose. But he lied. He did give them some quail, but it was like infected with like plague or disease or something. And many people like... Oh, ew. Gross. But yeah, so like, yeah, a lot of them got sick and stuff, and ugh, yuck. So he kind of did that as like a FU to the Israelites, because they were complaining. God forbid, they complain about being thirsty or hungry, you know what I mean? They're only biological beings. And I wasn't there, so I'm just simply saying, if you put yourself in these Israelite shoes, think about something. When you go to a restaurant and stuff, how patient are people when they're waiting for their food or their drinks? Seriously, how patient are most people, especially when they're hungry and thirsty? Imagine being in a hot desert with hundreds of thousands of people all around you for 3 days. No water, no food. You know what? It gives me anxiety just thinking about it, because I'm putting myself in that position. And I'm thinking, it's like, oh my God, it's been 3 days since we've had water. When we do get water, it's going to be a pain to get to the water, because there's so many people who want effing water, who are so desperate for water, it's going to be hard to get to the water. So I have, so much sympathy for these people. First of all, they never wanted to leave Egypt to begin with. They were fine where they were. Then they get dragged into this desert, thirsting to death, starving to death, watching their children die all around them. Like, I think most of them die. Like, all of this generation dies before they leave the desert. But, like, I don't know how much more their population even grew while they're in the desert, because it's like every other story, thousands and thousands of people dropping dead. So who knows if they even grew at all while they're in the desert. Maybe they just decreased in population. Because I can't imagine a desert is the most hospitable place for life to begin with. But I think Yahweh/Enlil knew this. You see, you notice something. It's like all these places that he takes them to, and then they go. It's supposed to be the promised land, it's supposed to be holy. It's odd that these days that most of these places are like desert and dry and barren. I don't think they were always like that, but they are now. And it's just interesting to me. Plus the no yeast thing, it kind of really supports this whole reptile thing, that Yahweh is a reptile. I think he is. I mean, I'm allowed to have my opinion. I don't think he's any god. I don't think he cared about these people. I think this was just an example of MK Ultra. The whole Willie Lynch letter, separate the first generation from the second generation, focus your attention on the second generation, make them learn a new language, don't let them have any idea of what their real past is. It's like all these things that he's doing that are like textbook how to make a slave. And dude, that's just the beginning. That's just the beginning of it. Okay, here we are. We're at... Oh, shoot, hold on. We get to the Amalekites. They come attack the Israelites at Rephidim, which is near Sinai. But as long as Moses holds his staff up, they win. Something like that. I don't know. They like to jump back and forth in this story because right now we're talking about Moses and Joshua. And it's odd because, like, I didn't even think Joshua was born yet at this point. So, yeah, they go back and forth quite a bit. It's hard to know what point of the story it is, but then we jump back in time, back to when they first get there in the desert. A man named Jethro, who is from Midian and happens to be the father-in-law of Moses. He comes. And, you know, And Jethro sees that Moses, like, pulled in, like, a million different directions from all these people. So he offers Moses some very valuable advice, telling him to appoint his own leaders to lead groups of 10s and stuff like that, so that all these people weren't constantly coming to Moses all the time and draining him. Then, you know, Moses sees that it's, you know, it's a good idea. He listens to his father-in-law. You know, spoiler alert. Moses' father-in-law and wife are Midian. That doesn't protect the land of Midian later, and you will see. Okay. So finally, on the 3rd month after they left Egypt, they arrive at Mount Sinai. Finally. So we are in Exodus 19. On the 1st day of the 3rd month, after the Israelites left Egypt, on that very day, they came to the desert of Sinai. After they had set out from Rephidim, they entered the desert of Sinai, and Israel camped there in the desert in front of the mountain. Then Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain and said, "This is what you are to say to the descendants of Jacob, and what you are to tell the people of Israel. You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself." Let me repeat that. You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Yeah, Yahweh and Enlil loves an eagle analogy. That's like their favorite bird or whatever. But the thing is, I carried you on eagle's wings. That is a very peculiar way to word it. I'm just going to leave it at that. Make of it what you will. Moving on to verse 5. Now, if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you are to speak to the Israelites. So what does this mean? He's basically saying that the whole earth already belongs to him and all groups of people belong to him, but that the Israelites will be his special people, his holy nation. It gives me the heebie-jeebies. It really does. It does. It gives me the heebie-jeebies. I don't like it. But anyway, okay. So then Moses goes back, and then he summons like the elders of all the people, and told them everything that Yahweh had said to him. And he said, "We will do everything the Lord has said." And then, you know, Moses lets the Lord know that they all agree and they're all on board. And then the Lord tells Moses, "Excellent! I am going to come to you in a dense cloud so that the people will hear me speaking with you and will always put their trust in you." What What's this dense cloud he speaks of? And the people will actually hear him speak. This is like an actual physical occurrence that's happening. Now imagine it. Imagine we're all like standing in a desert, and then all of a sudden this big puff cloud comes up and starts talking to us. Are you going to assume it's God, or are you going to assume that someone's playing tricks? I mean, back then, I guess they didn't really have much reference for that. So maybe it was more easy to manipulate them. But with everything that we've got now, it would take a little more than just a dense talking cloud to convince people. But that's all it took back then. At least that's what they say. So then Moses goes up to the mountain at some point. And he's there for quite a while, writing the 10 Commandments, probably learning the whole history, according to Yahweh's version, that is, and all this, because he's up there for quite a while. He's up there long enough for them to, make a golden calf, or something like that. Yeah, they're up there long enough for that. And then Moses comes down. Wait a minute. Am I getting too far ahead of myself? Yeah, I'm getting too far ahead of myself. Moses is still on Mount Sinai. Yahweh's explaining him the rules that they are all to follow from that day forward. It's odd. One of the very first rules he gives Moses is about how to treat slaves and sex slaves. Ugh. Exodus 21 verse 7. If a man sells his daughter as a servant, she is not to go free as the male servants do. If she does not please the master who has selected her for himself, he must let her be redeemed. He has no right to sell her to foreigners because he has broken faith with her. If he selects her for his son, he must grant her the rights of a daughter. If he marries another woman, he must not deprive the first one of her food, clothing, and marital rights. If he does not provide her with these 3 things, she is to go free without any payment of money. God. So basically, no matter how it works out, the guy always wins and she never does. But yeah, those are some of the first rules he gives. This does not sound like an all-loving God to me. No God I want to worship just talks about women like this. Like property. But anyways, there are so many rules between the Sabbath, the incense burning, the sacrifices, the tent of meeting. There's just... And I don't really want to lose you guys in all those details. But here's what's important to remember. Yahweh, sets up these, weird, creepy rituals that they've got to follow to a T, or they'll just drop dead. If they even light the wrong incense, they will drop dead, which is what happens to one of Aaron's sons eventually, inevitably. But listen, Moses apparently knows how Yahweh is at this point. Because once they come back down from the mountain, and they see that Aaron and all the Israelites had made this golden calf, Yahweh's about ready to kill them all. His insecurity is that deep that he is willing to kill them all over one dumb golden calf. But Moses appeals to Yahweh. And Exodus 32 verse 11. But Moses sought the favor of the Lord his God. Lord, he said, why should your anger burn against your people, whom you brought out of Egypt with great power and a mighty hand? Why should the Egyptians say, it was with evil intent that he brought them out, to kill them in the mountains and to wipe them off the face of the earth? Turn from your fierce anger, relent, and do not bring disaster on your people. So Moses speaks reason. The Lord does relent, and he decides not to kill them all. But if God is Yahweh is so all perfect and all powerful, Why is Moses the voice of reason here? I mean, honestly, he sounds like Yahweh. He really does. He sounds like a kid with a giant temper tantrum. Well, that's just me. It sounds ridiculous, and it seems to me Moses feels the same way. But at this point, they know they can't go back to Egypt after everything that happened, so they're kind of stuck. They're kind of stuck where they are. They know they can't go back. Not after that crazy, dramatic exit that they made. And what? I'll be honest with you guys. At first, before it really hit me what was happening here, it just seemed like that Yahweh was like one of those kids who just like crushing each ant out of an ant. Everyone's met one of those kids who's just sitting there crushing ant by ant by ant just because they can. You know what I mean? That's what it kind of reminds me of. The way Yahweh's treating these Israelites. Because it's like, no matter what they do or how hard they try, it's never quite good enough. Like, Aaron's sons, for example, all he did was just light the wrong incense and he drops dead. Now, I don't know if that was Yahweh who struck him dead or if it was the technology, the Ark of the Covenant that did. I'm not really sure. But something struck him dead. And then Aaron still had to atone. Like, okay, and that's just one example. Like, there's so many, like, torments. Like, okay, Miriam, for example. Moses' sister. Well, at some point, Moses marries, I don't know, some foreign woman, I guess. Miriam doesn't like it. And she confronts Moses about it. Well, then Yahweh just uses that as an excuse to inflict her with leprosy. Like, it's like these people had to be, like, on guard and careful what they did and said at all times. Like, they were constantly walking on eggshells. But I think it goes deeper than that. It's not, like, about torturing them or tormenting them. This is the programming. This is the mind programming, the mind control. Because these Israelites, whether they realized it or not, they were already teaching the next generation to obey and comply without question. Whether they realized it or not. And I just find it sad. I just find it sad. These people just seem like they were just held hostage. And then, like, let's get into the Levites for a minute, since we're supposed to be talking about Leviticus right now. Let's get into the Levites. Now, who are the Levites? Well, they are Israelites, yes, but they're one of the 12 tribes of the Israelites, okay? The Levites are different from any other tribe in the sense that while they were in Egypt, right, and the Egyptians had to do the Passover, or, well, they lost all their firstborn babies. The Israelites didn't lose their firstborn babies, but it still wasn't, they still didn't get off scot-free. They still had to make some sort of sacrifice. So the sacrifice ended up being that the whole entire tribe of Levi would belong to Yahweh. Not to die or to be sacrificed. No. That they would forever, like, work for Yahweh in his temples and, like, do his bidding and his sacrificing and things like that. They wouldn't even have a land of their own because they literally were owned by Yahweh. So even when we talk about the Passover, even then, they still didn't get off free. You know what I mean? They still had to give something up. And then at any other time of the year, I'm guessing they still had to give up their firstborn. Otherwise, why else would they call it a Passover if it applied all year long? You see what I mean? Like a Passover is a specific, 7 days during the year where they didn't have to? Well, what about the rest of the year? They very much did have to offer their firstborn. And as far as the Passover, they, like I said, they still didn't get away completely without any sacrifice because the whole tribe of Levi belonged to Yahweh at that point. But while they were in the desert, I find this very interesting. That while they were in the desert, when the Levites were learning a little bit more about their roles and a little bit more on how that they would be kind of held in a higher regard than the rest of their fellow Israelites. Believe it or not, the Levites didn't have a positive reaction to this at first like you'd think. They didn't. In fact, they were very unhappy. They demanded of Moses, no, all of us are holy people. All of us are. We're no better than anybody else. Well, guess what happened to that group of Levites who said all that? The earth swallowed them whole. I guess the way Yahweh saw it, if they wanted to complain about being held above everyone else, that they would just be earth food. And the rest of the Levites who kept their mouths shut would be okay. So a good portion of the Levites were killed because they didn't want to view themselves as superior to the other Israelites. And I think that's very important. It's very important. They weren't on board with all of this back then. I don't even know what the deal is now, if the priests in Israel are Levites or not. I'm not really sure now what the deal is, but back then, the Levites were not on board with all that. They didn't like it. And I guess the remaining Levites, we don't know if they were okay with it or not. They were smart enough to keep their mouths shut after they watched the earth swallow a third of their family whole. So, they pretty much accept their post, right? Now, like I said, the Levites, yes, they are above the rest of the Israelites. However, though, they're not quite as big of a deal as Aaron's descendants are. Now, Aaron is technically a Levite, just like Moses is. But it kind of starts his own little bloodline thing going on. Because, while the Levites were servants of Yahweh and servants of the priests, Aaron and his descendants were the actual priests. You see what I mean? And the Levites would assist them. They knew how to handle the sacred items without, getting radiation sickness and things like that. They just knew how to handle the stuff. So. Okay, yeah, and then there was a whole bunch of food rules too. Yeah, let me mention that real quick. They're not allowed to eat anything technically unclean. They're not allowed to drink blood. Which, good, that sounds gross. But also, apparently they're not even allowed to eat fat. How bland and tasteless must their meals have been? They were not allowed to eat any fat whatsoever. That's all the flavor, dude. But anyways, that's not that important. Let's see, what else? Oh yeah, the tabernacle. I think as far as the tabernacle goes, and the ritual and the garments and the curtains and the courtyard and the whole basic layout of the Ark of the Covenant and the tent of the meeting, I might have to do a whole other video on. For those of you who are interested in architecture and things like that, come back for that video, because I don't really want to spend too much time on this video and all that, because this is more about the behavior programming than anything. All due respect, I don't really give a rat's ass about what the tabernacle looked like, about any of that. Yes, I do find it fascinating and interesting, but as far as this behavior modification and programming goes, that's what I'd rather focus on. I think that's the elephant in the room everyone, avoids talking about. Anyways, let me continue. Okay, now, we're at the point now, I don't know how long it's been since Aaron's son was slaughtered by Yahweh, But we come to the point in the story where Aaron must atone for it, for the mistakes of his son. What mistake was it? He accidentally wrote the wrong incense and he just died right on the spot. But Aaron must atone for it. So right now I'm in Leviticus 16. Yes, I know, I skipped over a bunch. Like I said, it was all about like all that extra stuff that I'm going to do a whole other video on about the rules and all this other, because it's just so much. It's just too much to really waste time with. Like I said, I'm more focused on the behavior programming. But okay, Leviticus 16, the Day of Atonement. The Lord spoke to Moses after the death of the it was 2 sons that Aaron lost. Okay, I thought it was just 1. No, he lost 2 sons. The Lord said to Moses, "Tell your brother Aaron that he is not to come whenever he chooses into the most holy place behind the curtain in front of the atonement cover on the ark. Or else he will die, for I will appear in the cloud over the atonement cover. This is how Aaron is to enter the most holy place. He must first bring a young bull for a sin offering, a ram for a burnt offering. He is to put on the sacred linen tunic with the linen undergarments next to his body. He is to tie the linen sash around him and put the linen turban. These are sacred garments, so he must bathe himself with water before he puts them on." What does that sound like to you all? Doesn't that kind of sound a little bit similar to like people like who have to deal with radiation and stuff like that? All these special garments and procedures that they must follow or they'll just die. I mean, I find it very strange and suspicious. It sounds like this ark was an extremely dangerous device that Yahweh knew was dangerous, that Yahweh knew would cause damage to primitive people who weren't ready for this type of technology, didn't know how to handle it. Because that's exactly what it did. It caused, like, nothing but death. I mean, yeah, it helped them a lot too, but mostly caused a lot of death. But anyways, how does Aaron make atonement? He slaughters a whole bunch of animals. Like a whole bunch. He makes atonement for himself, for his sons, for the Israelites. I mean, he was probably just had the knife in his hand all day, just slit the throats of cows and rams and stuff. Like, what a bloody ritual that must have been. Could you imagine, guys? Okay, those of you who are, like, obsessed and say that this is all right and this is all the word of God and all that, could you imagine, like, a group of people just, like, going out, like, with, like, lambs and goats and cows and just slitting their throats and pouring the blood all over the altar and, like, doing all this stuff? Like, how could you look at that and not think of, like, Satanism or something like that? Like, I don't know. I don't know. I think, if you remember my first video when we were talking about Noah's Ark, I think that was, like, the biggest thing to me. It was like, it wasn't enough that the whole earth was dead. That Yahweh had literally like, exterminated so many different species of living organisms during that flood. But that it still wasn't enough. That Noah still had to perform an animal sacrifice with the few animals he had left. I don't know why people think that I don't know. Think what you want, but I refuse to believe that there's any good in that, any goodness in that. Maybe it's easy to put, like, these in, like, different categories in our mind because we grew up reading these stories and such. But if you really reread these stories from, like, just a moral perspective, there's something not adding up. There's something immoral about all of this. But anyways, I think that's where I'm going to leave it off from here. We'll pick up from Leviticus, our next video. And then maybe continue on to Numbers. It's a lot of repetitive stuff. I'm not going to be repeating, like, the same stuff over and over again. I just want to point out the stuff that we haven't talked about yet. Because there's a lot of stuff that goes down in Leviticus and Numbers that deserve paying attention to. Oh, God. especially in Numbers. Like, you just wait. Jesus Christ. All due respect, Jesus. It's a mess. It's a mess. And one more thing. If all of this, let's pretend this whole story of Moses, right? Let's pretend something like this happened today in like modern day. Like a story unfolded similar to this story, right? In modern day. It wouldn't have the same effect. It wouldn't work. You know what I mean? Like, you notice how Yahweh, aka Enlil, he's very clever. Like, he knows, like, what is socially acceptable, what's not socially acceptable. He knows, like, that when humanity has grown to a certain point where certain tricks won't work anymore. Which is why the New Testament seems so vastly different from the Old Testament. It's because it is. It's because humans had evolved to a certain point around the time around the time the New Testament was written. They had like grown beyond that primitive mindset that the Moses and his people had in the Old Testament. So when they grow a little more, and then you have someone like Jesus come along making people question all these old stories and all these old narratives, then suddenly Yahweh's strategy changes, right? They don't, suddenly it's okay. You don't got to slaughter and slit the throats of cows and rams. Now you just simply ask me for forgiveness and I will forgive you. So yeah, and they're doing something similar-ish now. Like, it's like they're constantly trying to keep up with our evolution to keep us in control. You know what I mean? And I'll explain a little bit more about that in the next video, but it's something I've noticed a lot lately. And I hope others have noticed it too, because, dude, I am looking forward to the day when humanity gets to the point where we move beyond the slavery and the hatred and the stuff that has been forced on us. Stuff that we should have already long well learned generations ago. I'm looking forward to the day when we can actually move on and start learning new lessons and actually growing. I look forward to that. But anyways, this is all my opinion. Please, let me know in the comments how you feel. Did I say something that didn't make sense? Did I say something that you think you got a better explanation for? Please let me know. I love criticism because it's actually helped me to this point, is the criticism. So, you know, respectfully, please, let me know if you picked up something different than I did. I would love to hear. I'd love to hear from you all, please. Anyways, we will be back in the next video. We'll finish up Leviticus and Numbers so we can move on to the kings and such. Thank you. Have a great day.